The first time Ambassador Yorveth of the Glorn Dominion heard the word barbecue, he recoiled in visible disgust. His bioluminescent skin rippled with a horrified shade of green as he translated the term through his neural implant. "You mean," he clarified, staring at the human diplomat before him, "that you burn the flesh of creatures over open fire, then consume it as he hesitated, searching for a word that wouldn't turn his stomach. Delicacy." Jake Bronson, representative of Earth's Interstellar Diplomacy Corps, grinned. "Oh yeah. And it's not just about the cooking. It's about the sauce, the smoke, the company." He gestured broadly toward the sprawling outdoor festival set up in the heart of New Austin's Spaceport Plaza. Massive smokers chugged out thick, fragrant plumes of wood-fired aroma, while vendors shouted orders over sizzling grills. "We call it barbecue. It's an art form, a lifestyle." Yorveth shuddered, his spindly fingers twitching in revulsion. His people, the Glorn, were strict herbivores, their diet consisting almost entirely of cultivated algae and nutrient-dense biopaste. The idea of eating meat, let alone slow roasting it over an open flame, struck him as something out of a savage age. "I was assured that Earth cuisine would adhere to galactic nutritional ethics," he said, turning to glare at his assistant, a nervous-looking Glorn named Zeboth. Zeboth shrank back. "This, was not in the reports, Ambassador." Jake clapped Yorveth on the back, causing the ambassador to emit a startled chirp. "Relax, big guy. We've got vegetarian options too, but if you judge before you taste, you might just miss out on the greatest culinary experience in the universe." Yorveth rubbed his thin, clawed hands together. "Ambassador Bronson, my role here is to establish a cultural and economic exchange, not to partake in barbaric consumption rituals." Jake smirked. "Then don't eat. But at least stay and observe. You might learn something." Yorveth, against his better judgment, agreed. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden light over the festival as a band played upbeat country music on a floating stage. Humans and aliens alike milled about, chatting and laughing as they sampled grilled vegetables, smoked brisket, and saucy ribs. Even the reptilian Uxarn delegates, who rarely partook in non-native foods, seemed to be enjoying themselves, gnawing on thick slabs of smoked meat. Yorveth took a cautious step forward, his nostrils flaring as the mingling scents of charred wood, spices, and rendered fat assaulted his senses. It was a smell both repulsive and inexplicably intriguing. A towering human pitmaster, his face streaked with soot and his apron stained with sauce, waved a pair of tongs in greeting. "Ambassador, welcome. You ever had ribs before?" Yorveth stiffened. "Absolutely not." Jake elbowed him. "Come on, just watch. You don't have to eat." The pitmaster lifted a slab of ribs from the smoker, the caramelized glaze glistening under the lights. He sliced off a piece, revealing tender, smoke-ringed meat beneath the bark. A nearby human took a bite and moaned in pleasure. "This is ridiculous," Yorveth muttered. Zeboth, trying to be diplomatic, asked, "May we at least see the preparation process?" "For cultural analysis." The pitmaster grinned. "Oh, you bet. See, first we coat it in a rub secret blend, of course, then we slow smoke it for about 6 hours. Yorveth listened, his skepticism only growing. The process seemed painstakingly elaborate for something so primitive. Why spend hours cooking something that could be synthesized instantly? "And the sauce," Jake added, "is what brings it all together." He dipped a rib into a small bowl and took a bite, sighing contentedly. Sweet, smoky, a little heat at the end. Perfection. Yorveth could hardly believe what he was witnessing. Distinguished diplomats from across the galaxy, acting like mindless carnivorous beasts over burned animal flesh. He folded his arms. "I cannot comprehend how such a practice could hold cultural significance." Jake wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "It's not just about the food, it's about history, tradition. Barbecue goes back centuries on Earth. It's about patience, craftsmanship, and, yeah, it's about getting your hands messy." He licked his fingers pointedly. Yorveth's gills flared in revulsion. "You are all savages." Jake shrugged. "Suit yourself." Hours passed, and Yorveth remained at the festival, observing the humans with scientific detachment. He noted their rituals, the way they gathered around fire pits, how they debated over sauces with passionate intensity. He watched as they prepared their food with a level of care and precision that, against all reason, resembled high art. Still, he refused to partake. Then, disaster struck. One of the Exarn delegates, emboldened by enthusiasm, attempted to consume a full slab of ribs in one bite. Unfortunately, Exarn lacked the proper jaw articulation for such a feat. The bone lodged in his throat, and within moments the alien was thrashing, eyes bulging. Gasps rang out. Panic spread. Yorveth stood frozen. The Sarn was suffocating. Then Jake sprang into action. He rushed forward, positioned himself behind the alien, and with a practiced motion, delivered a forceful compression just beneath the rib cage. A wet pop followed, and the bone shot from the Exarn's mouth, landing with an unceremonious splat onto the pavement. The crowd erupted in cheers. The Sharn coughed, then rumbled in gratitude. Yorveth was stunned. He had heard of the human technique, the Heimlich maneuver. They called it, but seeing it in action was another matter entirely. Jake had acted without hesitation, his only concern the well-being of another, regardless of species. Something shifted in the Glorn Ambassador. Perhaps humans were not entirely barbaric. Perhaps, against all reason, there was something to this madness. His eyes fell on a nearby plate of ribs. He hesitated. Jake noticed and grinned, thinking about trying one. Yorveth straightened. 4. Scientific purposes. Jake slid the plate toward him. Be my guest. Yorveth picked up a rib with delicate fingers. The glaze was sticky, the texture alien to him. He sniffed cautiously. The scent, though unfamiliar, was no longer offensive. It was curiously inviting. He closed his eyes and took a bite. His entire world shifted. The richness of the meat, the tang of the sauce, the deep smokiness that lingered, it was a revelation. He chewed slowly, processing the experience. The complexity of flavor, the interplay of sweet and spice. The texture so tender it nearly melted on his tongue. Yorveth swallowed. And then, without thinking, he reached for another. Jake laughed. Oh, buddy, you're in for a wild ride. Yorveth did not respond. He was too busy devouring his second rib. And then his third. And then his fourth. Yorveth's third rib was gone before he even realized what he was doing. By the fourth, he had abandoned all pretense of scientific observation. His hands, once so pristine and poised, were now slathered in sauce, his elongated fingers sticky with glaze. The rich, smoky flavors danced on his tongue, and for the first time in his long diplomatic career, he was speechless. Jake, leaning back with a knowing smirk, sipped his beer. You good, buddy? Yorveth swallowed and licked his fingers, an act that would have horrified him mere hours ago. His bioluminescent skin pulsed with conflicted emotions. Disgust? No. Shame? Perhaps. But beneath it all, an overwhelming, undeniable pleasure. He cleared his throat, attempting to regain some semblance of dignity. I must analyze the depth of flavor further before forming a conclusive opinion. Jake chuckled. Uh-huh. Sure you do. Zeboth, meanwhile, looked on in complete horror. Ambassador, he whispered, eyes wide, you are consuming. Flesh. Cooked flesh. Yorveth wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, sauce smearing across his pale skin. Yes, Assistant Zeboth, I am well aware. Zeboth's gills flared. But you said it was barbaric. Yorveth paused, staring at the discarded bones on his plate. He picked up another rib, this time studying it as one might a fine work of art. The texture, the marbling, the caramelized edges. He took a deliberate bite, chewed thoughtfully, and nodded. I may have been hasty in my assessment. Jake slapped the table. Knew you'd come around. As the evening stretched on, Yorveth found himself drawn into the human ritual. The music, the firelight, the camaraderie, it was intoxicating in a way that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with something else. Something deeper. The festival became an impromptu culinary diplomacy summit. Delegates from a dozen species gathered around, each drawn by curiosity, laughter, and the sheer absurdity of watching a high-ranking Glorn ambassador devour an entire rack of ribs. A burly Zarn warrior pounded his chest and proclaimed, "This earth food has strength," before challenging a human to a rib-eating contest. A delicate insectoid dren from the outer colonies clicked its mandibles thoughtfully over a plate of grilled eggplant, muttering about intriguing char patterns. Even a delegation of Vort traders, known for their notoriously bland diets, hesitantly dipped their food into a small bowl of sauce and recoiled in shock at the explosion of flavor. The universal translator struggled to keep up with the enthusiastic descriptions being thrown around. Smoky, tangy, savory. None of these words had direct equivalents in half the languages present. Yorveth, by now fully committed, took it upon himself to act as a kind of cultural intermediary. "You must understand," he explained to a skeptical Gorth bureaucrat, licking sauce from his fingers, "it is not merely the taste, it is the process, the patience, the ritual of it." The Gorth blinked its 6 beady eyes. But why cook for hours when nutrients can be extracted instantly? Jake jumped in. "Because it's about more than just eating. It's about earning the flavor, about coming together and sharing something you can't just replicate." Yorveth nodded sagely. "Precisely." Zeboth, now sitting at the far end of the table with his arms crossed, let out a defeated sigh. "This is madness." Things took an unexpected turn when the Glorn homeworld sent a priority transmission directly to Yorveth's communicator. A blue holographic projection of High Chancellor Zelith flickered to life above the table. Her expression, even through the distortion, was one of barely contained displeasure. "Ambassador Yorveth," she said, her voice sharp, "we have received disturbing reports." Yorveth, his mouth still half full of rib, straightened immediately. "High Chancellor, I assure you I have everything under control." Zelith's gills fluttered with irritation. "Your assistant has filed an official diplomatic concern regarding your behavior." Zeboth perked up. "I had to. He's abandoned all standards. He's eating like a human." Zelith's glowing eyes darkened. "Is this true?" There was a long, tense pause. Every diplomat at the table watched, frozen, as Yorveth slowly wiped his fingers, sat up straight, and took a deep breath. Then, in a calm, measured voice, he replied, "High Chancellor, I have tasted the ribs." Silence. "Shay." Jake covered his mouth to keep from laughing. Zelith blinked. "You what?" Yorveth placed a hand on the table, nodding with absolute seriousness. "I understand your concerns, but you must believe me when I say that this is more than mere indulgence. I have witnessed something profound tonight." Zelith stared at him. "Ambassador, you are meant to be securing trade agreements, not engaging in primitive carnivorous feasts." Yorveth folded his hands. "And yet, High Chancellor, I have learned more about humanity in a single evening at this festival than I have in all my years of study." Jake leaned back with a grin. "Tell her, Yorveth." Zelith's gills flared. "Are you seriously suggesting that charred animal flesh is a viable diplomatic tool?" Yorveth met her gaze with unwavering resolve. "I am saying that in all our centuries of galactic diplomacy, we have undervalued the power of shared experience. These humans have forged alliances not through treaties, but through barbecue." A murmur spread through the gathered diplomats. Zelith remained silent for a long moment. Then, finally, she sighed. "Very well. I will not recall you yet. But I expect a full report." "Of course, High Chancellor." The transmission cut. Jake whistled. "Well, that was a close one." Zeboth groaned, burying his face in his hands. Yorveth, still deep in thought, picked up one last rib. He examined it closely, the way the sauce clung to the meat, the way the smoke had kissed its edges. Then he turned to Jake. "Tell me," he said, "how does one make this sauce?" Jake's grin widened. "Oh, buddy, you just opened a whole new can of worms." And with that, the night was far from over. By the time the festival's bonfires dimmed to glowing embers, Yorveth had moved beyond mere consumption. He was now studying barbecue. The flavors, the textures, the preparation, he wanted to understand it all. The skepticism that once defined his stance had vanished, replaced by a deep, almost unnerving curiosity. Jake, sensing an opportunity, led him behind one of the largest smokers. "All right, Professor Ribbs, if you're serious about learning, you gotta see how the magic happens." Yorveth clasped his hands behind his back, attempting to look dignified despite the lingering traces of sauce on his fingers. "Very well. Educate me." The pitmaster, a burly man named Cole, greeted them with a wide grin. "So our alien friend wants to know the secrets of barbecue, huh?" Yorveth lifted his chin. "It is my duty as a diplomat to understand human traditions in full." Cole wiped his hands on his grease-streaked apron and gestured toward the massive cylindrical smoker. "First thing you gotta know, it's all about patience. You can't rush good barbecue. Some of these cuts have been cooking for 16 hours. Yorveth's bioluminescent skin flickered. "That is inefficient." Cole barked out a laugh. "Oh, I like this guy." He lifted the smoker's heavy lid, and a wave of heat rolled out, carrying the rich, intoxicating aroma of slow-cooked meat. Inside, racks of ribs and glistening briskets rested beneath a haze of fragrant wood smoke. Cole grabbed a small handful of wood chips and tossed them into the firebox. "We use different woods for different flavors: hickory, mesquite, cherry. Each one adds something special." Yorveth's eyes narrowed. "You burn plant matter to enhance the taste." Jake patted his shoulder. "Told you. It's an art." Yorveth reached out, hesitantly tracing a clawed finger along the smooth surface of a brisket. The texture was nothing like the synthesized foods of his homeworld. It was real, organic, imperfect in the way only something truly handcrafted could be. He glanced up at Cole. "And the sauce." Cole chuckled. "Now that is where things get serious. Every pitmaster's got their own secret recipe. Some go sweet, some go spicy, some tangy. It's all about balance." He gestured to a row of bottles filled with deep crimson liquid. "Here, try these." Yorveth hesitated for only a moment before dipping a finger into a small bowl of sauce. He brought it to his lips. The explosion of flavor hit him instantly, sweet, smoky, with a slow burning heat that spread across his tongue. His gills fluttered. "This is," he paused, struggling to find the words. "It is not merely a condiment. It is an enhancement, a unifying force that binds the flavors together." Jake grinned. "Now you're getting it." Yorveth straightened, his mind racing. "I must learn how to create it." Cole leaned against the smoker. "You want to make your own sauce." Yorveth folded his hands. "It is only logical. If I am to present a full diplomatic report on Earth's culinary traditions, I must understand them from the ground up." Cole whistled. "Well, damn. All right then, let's get you started." What followed was something no Glorn diplomat had ever done before. Yorveth, ambassador of the Glorn Dominion, began crafting his own barbecue sauce. Under Cole's guidance, he experimented with different ingredients: molasses for sweetness, vinegar for tang, smoked paprika for depth. Each adjustment sent him into deep contemplation. "This ratio is crucial," he muttered, carefully measuring out a teaspoon of mustard. "Too much acidity will overpower the smokiness." Jake leaned against the counter, watching in amusement. "I gotta say, I did not see this coming." Yorveth ignored him, completely engrossed. He dipped a spoon into the mixture and tasted it, his eyes widening. "It is acceptable." Cole shook his head. "Nah, if you want to make real sauce, you gotta trust your instincts." Yorveth frowned. "Instincts?" "Yeah, don't just think about the ingredients. Feel them." Yorveth considered this, then slowly reached for a bottle of hot sauce. He hesitated, then, with a decisive motion, poured a generous amount into the mix. He stirred, tasted, and his bioluminescent skin pulsed with excitement. "This," he announced, "is extraordinary." Jake took a sample. His eyebrows shot up. "Damn, Yorveth. That's actually really good." Cole clapped him on the back. "Congratulations, Ambassador. You just made your first batch of Glorn-style barbecue sauce. Yorveth looked down at the thick, reddish-brown mixture. It wasn't just sauce. It was something he had created, something uniquely his. And he felt proud. The festival wound down, but word of Yorveth's culinary revelation had already spread. The next morning, delegates from across the galaxy approached him not to discuss trade negotiations or treaties, but to ask about his sauce. A Zarn chef requested a sample, insisting he needed to analyze its molecular composition. A Vort trader offered him a deal: 2 crates of rare gemstones in exchange for the recipe. Even Zeboth, despite his vocal protests, eyed the container with reluctant curiosity. Jake clapped Yorveth on the back. "You're a celebrity now." Yorveth, who had spent his entire career engaged in dry, bureaucratic negotiations, was stunned. This was what connected species. Not complex treaties or economic strategies, but flavor? He took a deep breath. "Perhaps I have misjudged humanity." Jake smirked. "Happens a lot." Yorveth looked down at his sauce, deep in thought. Then, with newfound determination, he turned to Cole. "Pitmaster, I require a smoker." Cole blinked. "You want to cook now?" Yorveth nodded. "If I am to master this craft, I must commit fully." Jake burst into laughter. "Oh, this is going to be good." And so, against all logic, a Glorn ambassador once repulsed by the very concept of barbecue began his journey to becoming a true pitmaster. He studied the fire, the wood, the delicate balance of smoke and seasoning. He experimented, adjusting his sauce recipe with meticulous precision. And when, at last, he pulled his first batch of ribs from the smoker, he felt something unexpected. Not just satisfaction. Not just pride. Something deeper. He took a bite. It was perfect. And for the first time in his long, distinguished career, Yorveth didn't care about politics or diplomacy. He just wanted another bite. 3 weeks later, the Glorn Dominion sent an emergency delegation to Earth. Ambassador Yorveth had gone rogue. At least that was how the High Chancellor described it in her frantic transmission to the Galactic Council. She demanded immediate intervention, citing irreversible cultural contamination and unacceptable culinary deviation from standard Glorn protocol. Jake Bronson found the entire situation hilarious. "So let me get this straight," he said, lounging in his chair as he read the official summons. "They're sending a whole diplomatic team just to stop you from making barbecue." Yorveth, standing beside a smoking grill, flipped a rack of ribs with the practiced ease of a seasoned pitmaster. "They do not understand the significance of what I have discovered," he said solemnly. "But they will." Jake smirked. "And how's that?" Yorveth gestured toward the festival grounds, which had now transformed into something far more ambitious: the First Interstellar Barbecue Exchange. What had begun as a mere festival had evolved into a full-blown culinary movement. Representatives from over a dozen species had arrived to partake, each bringing their own unique ingredients and cooking methods. The Zarn had introduced massive, flame-seared cuts of their native beast, the Gorlak. The Dren had perfected a method of smoking protein-rich insect paste into delicate, flaky wafers. Even the normally reserved Vort had started experimenting with spice-infused marinades. And at the center of it all was Yorveth, clad in a grease-streaked apron that read "Kiss the Pitmaster," stirring a pot of his now famous Glorn-style barbecue sauce. Jake shook his head in disbelief. "You were supposed to be negotiating trade routes. Instead, you started a galactic food revolution." Yorveth dusted his hands off and turned to face Jake, his expression unwavering. "The purpose of diplomacy is to unite cultures, is it not?" He gestured to the gathering crowd: humans, aliens, politicians, traders, warriors, all brought together not by treaties, but by fire, smoke, and the universal language of good food. Jake exhaled. Yeah, hard to argue with results. Then the sky split open. A Glorn diplomatic vessel, sleek and ominous, descended into the festival grounds, its landing thrusters kicking up dust and scattering napkins into the air. The crowd quieted as a delegation of robed officials emerged, led by none other than High Chancellor Zeleth herself. Her gills flared as she took in the scene, the sizzling grills, the towering smokers, the sight of her esteemed ambassador standing over a rack of ribs like some kind of primitive caveman. "Ambassador Yorveth," she said, her voice cold and formal, "you have disgraced the Dominion." Yorveth, unfazed, wiped his hands on his apron and stepped forward. "High Chancellor, welcome to the festival." Gagzeleth's bioluminescence flickered in a rapid pattern of fury. "This is not a festival. This is a diplomatic embarrassment." She glanced around at the assembled species. "You were sent to Earth to broker trade agreements, not to immerse yourself in barbaric food rituals." Yorveth took a deep breath, then met her gaze with absolute certainty. "High Chancellor, I have achieved far more than mere trade agreements." He extended a hand toward the festival. "Look around you. These species, many of whom have been divided by centuries of conflict, have come together for a single purpose." He picked up a slab of ribs, holding it with reverence. "To share." Zeleth recoiled. "You cannot be serious." "I am." Yorveth's voice was steady. "Our diplomatic philosophy has been flawed. We have long believed that peace is achieved through regulation, through law, through carefully crafted agreements." He paused, letting the silence hang. "But humans have shown me something different. They build connections not through mandates, but through experience." Jake, watching from the sidelines, let out a low whistle. "Damn, that's a speech." Yorveth continued, his voice unwavering. "Food is not merely sustenance. It is a bridge. It is history. It is identity. And in sharing it, we share a part of ourselves." He gestured again to the crowd, where a Zarn chef was laughing with a Dren diplomat over a plate of experimental spice-rubbed ribs. "Tell me, High Chancellor, have you ever truly connected with another species beyond formalities and negotiations?" Zeleth hesitated. The crowd waited, silent. Then, reluctantly, she folded her arms. "This is not how diplomacy is conducted." Yorveth stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Perhaps it should be." Another pause. Then Zeleth sighed. "I assume you intend to prove this theory." Yorveth nodded and handed her a plate. "Yes, starting now." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The High Chancellor of the Glorn Dominion was being offered. Ribs? Zeleth looked down at the plate with visible distrust. The smell alone was overwhelming, rich, smoky, layered with depth. Carefully, she picked up a rib with 2 fingers, inspecting it as though it were a live specimen under a microscope. The crowd held its breath. She took a bite. The moment stretched on forever. And then, slowly, her eyes widened. A flicker of something crossed her face: confusion, disbelief, and then, against all odds, approval. She took another bite, then another. The tension in the air shattered as the crowd erupted into cheers. Jake threw an arm around Yorveth's shoulder. "You absolute madman. You just got the High Chancellor of the Glorn Dominion to love barbecue." Yorveth exhaled, relief washing over him. It was inevitable. Galith, now halfway through her ribs, cleared her throat. "Ambassador Yorveth." He straightened. "Yes, High Chancellor." She dabbed her mouth with a napkin, then fixed him with a level stare. "If I permit this exchange to continue, I expect reports. Full documentation on the impact of these culinary interactions." Yorveth bowed. "Of course." She exhaled. "And I will require more of this sauce." Yorveth smiled. Naturally. The High Chancellor of the Glorn Dominion had officially converted. And with that, the First Interstellar Barbecue Exchange was declared a galactic success. 1 year later, Earth's influence had spread in the most unexpected way. Across the galaxy, smoking pits and open flames were no longer seen as primitive, but as symbols of cultural unity. Trade agreements had flourished not over boardroom negotiations, but over carefully crafted spice blends and sauce recipes. And at the heart of it all, in a quiet corner of the Orion Belt, a small but bustling restaurant opened under a new, glowing neon sign. Yorveth's Intergalactic Smokehouse. The first Glorn-owned barbecue joint in the galaxy. Jake Bronson stood in line, arms crossed as he watched the crowd of hungry patrons humans, Zarn, Dren, Vort each waiting for a taste of what had once been dismissed as barbaric. Yorveth, wearing his Kiss the Pitmaster apron, worked the smoker with the ease of a seasoned veteran. Jake shook his head with a grin. Never in my life did I think I'd see a Glorn Ambassador running a barbecue joint. Yorveth handed him a plate of ribs. Never in my life did I think I'd be happy doing it. Jake took a bite, grinning. The galaxy would never be the same. And it was delicious.